Greetings. My name is Gray and I am a clinical social worker. Thank you for joining me on the first of three trainings looking at developmental informed trauma-aware crisis intervention and de-escalation. Our first video will look at building a framework. That framework includes who am I, who are you, and what does it mean to have experienced trauma? But before we do that, there are three core values that I'd like you to consider. Number one, we have a responsibility to meet our clients at their level of functioning, which is difficult to do sometimes, especially if they're making really poor choices or really struggling with functioning. But instead of coming in at our client from this point and our clients here, we want to come in and try to be as close to their level of functioning. Number two, don't work harder on a client on their life. What does that mean exactly? Well, there's always an exception to a rule. And if a client is suicidal, we would work harder than them to address that. But otherwise, when clients struggle with owning their own safety and their empowerment, we give them the tools, but we can't work harder than the client on their life. Number three, always respect self-determination, which means clients may make choices we don't agree with, but we have to respect their right to make that choice. So looking at the code of ethics, and this is the social work code of ethics, we promote clients' social responsible self-determination, and social workers seek to enhance clients' capacity and opportunity for change and to address their own needs. So it is our responsibility to meet clients at their level of functioning, respect their choices, their self-determination, but not work harder on their life than them. So who are we exactly? Well, as an individual, I am a 50-plus-year-old male. I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a husband of 30-plus years. But as an individual, I'm made up of four parts: my behaviors, how I think about things, and how I feel about things. Now, I have come to figure out through my years of experience that some people are great thinkers and some are great doers and some are great feelers and some are great at a combination of more than one. Individually, I'm more of a doer and a feeler. My wife is a thinker and a doer. So together we sort of balance each other. But sometimes in making decisions, my wife will really want to think through things where I just want to get some stuff done. So what kind of person are you? Are you a thinker, feeler, or doer? Or are you a combination of two of those? We do all of them, but where do you excel? Those three components are glued together by our value, our vision. By the way, our values systems, those are stored in our cerebral cortex, in the front part, the thinking part of our brain. What are our values? All of that equates to our worldview. So what exactly is your worldview? And how did you develop that worldview? Skinner states that our learning, right, our individual shaped by our positive and negative reinforcements, our positive and negative environments, modeling, observation, and all of that starts at a really early age, really early. So let's think about your worldview. Take a moment to answer these questions for yourself. Are you the kind of person that sees strengths or stretches? Are you the kind of person that criticizes or seeks solutions? Are you the kind of person that sees the glass as half empty or half full? Are you the kind of person that lives in and uses and respects the golden rule? And that's not they who have the most gold win. It is treat people the way you want to be treated. Are you willing to ask hard questions? Are you willing to be asked hard questions? What is your view of the world? So taking that lens, right, that ecological approach, let's apply a layer on top called the strengths perspective. The strengths perspective has a few components. Let's go through those. Number one, we believe that all individuals have strengths, and their strengths are layered, and sometimes their strengths can come off as deficits, but in reality, they could be strengths. For instance, a child that learns to forage in a trash can for food, and then he goes into a foster home and he raids the kitchen at night, we could say that's a negative, but in all reality, he is using his strength to take care of himself. The strengths perspective is based on an assumption that all humans have a capacity for growth and change. We, as social service agents, believe in growth and change. And we meet the client where the client is. We create opportunities for the clients to use their strengths. We empower them, we equip them with tools so that they can achieve their own goals. And the focus isn't the problem, the focus needs to be on the solutions. And we want to be present oriented, here and now. When we are problem focused, our clients who have extensive histories of trauma will see themselves as the problem. The problem will be a deficit. They will become a deficit. We don't want to label the problem. We don't want to pathologize them. And remember that hurt clients who have a hurt view of the world, they will definitely believe that they are the problem. So if we focus on the problem, right, then all we're doing is reinforcing their negative view of the world. So what exactly does it mean to be trauma-informed? Being trauma-informed does not mean you're just using evidence-based tools. And trauma-informed has a myth. Oh, we're trauma-informed, so we'd never hold clients accountable to their choices and behaviors. Again, not true. We meet clients at their level of functioning. We believe in their self-determination. We don't work harder than the client. We acknowledge and validate they have a right to make a choice. And if they make a really negative choice, that's on them, and we can't prevent those negative choices. Being trauma-informed says that every part of an organization understands the impact of trauma, just not the clinical team. It would be clinical team, advocate team, case management team, the front office team, development. It would include the kitchen staff, the maintenance team. Everybody understands that our clients are interacting with their trauma triggers, and interacting with each other and their own traumas and triggers. Trauma-informed organizations, programs, services are based on the understanding of vulnerabilities of those triggers so that services and programs can be more supportive and we avoid re-traumatization. Being trauma-informed refers to all the ways in which service systems are influenced by having an understanding of trauma. It operates within a model or framework that incorporates or understands of the ways in which trauma impacts an individual's emotional well-being, their physical health, their decision-making. We should decrease the risk of re-traumatization and create an environment that is all about the recovery of traumatic stress. So when I talk about trauma with clients, I do Grayisms a little bit. This is a Grayism. Little T's are life-altering traumas. Big T's are life-threatening traumas. Complex T's, little t's, big T's, are exposure to chronic, very acute daily stressors. Living in domestic violence every day would be a complex trauma. Living in, with an abusive father who molests you every night would be a complex trauma. A big T trauma, life-threatening, could be a terrible car accident or a terrible storm. Life-altering traumas could be the losses that we experience through life as we go along this journey, right? In 1989, my mom passed away very suddenly. That was a life-altering trauma for me. It was a little T trauma. Secondary traumas, right? Secondary traumas are all the traumas that we as caregivers experience by our clients sharing their big T traumas and little T traumas and complex traumas with us. When firefighters arrive on an accident, right, they are being exposed to secondary trauma. because the clients have been exposed to the big T traumas and the little T traumas of the fire. Some considerations about trauma. Number one, it's stored primarily on the right side of the brain. These sensory and emotional modes. The sensory experiences over time can remain stable, but can reoccur through triggers and flashbacks. These imprints tend to occur in a mental state, and the person may not always be able to articulate what they are thinking or feeling in regards to their trauma. And the immediate response to trauma sets the stage for healing. So let me explain. If I come to you and I share that my uncle has been hurting me, and your response is, Gray, I'm so sorry. I will do everything to keep you safe. That promotes healing. But if I come to you and say, Mom, my uncle is hurting me, and your response is, Uncle John, he loves you. He would never do that. That is the opposite of validation. That is disempowering, and it sets the stage for no healing because you didn't believe me. Please understand that the threat of loss is equal to loss. We all endure losses in our life. I gave you an example of the loss of my mom in 1989. That was a little T trauma for me. But the threat of loss is also threatening. When agencies go through change, that can be threatening, that can be loss. Children who have responded to injury, to traumas by acting out, those behaviors are their trauma reenactment. And adults do this as well. Some adults will be very aggressive, and other adults will be very passive. Either way, that is their trauma language and their trauma reenactment. And again, these triggers can be cued by words, sounds, smells, colors, feelings. And trauma disrupts attachment. It disrupts our natural ability to connect and be connected. We are social creatures. We're not meant to be in social isolation. We are meant and we're wired developmentally to connect and to attach. And trauma disrupts that. It's like a virus. So from a individual therapist position, there's a couple of terms I want to share. It's called transference and countertransference. Transference is when I remind the client of something in their life. Maybe my voice, the tone of my voice reminds them of someone they loved in their life, or maybe someone that they didn't love. Countertransference is when a client's presentation reminds us, right, the advocate, the case manager, the clinician, of something in our life. So what is the parallel process? It is countertransference and transference at the macro level. Those first examples I gave you are at the micro level, but at the macro level would be the parallel process. Organizations under stress will look like individuals under stress. If we know that trauma can affect an individual, the way we think, feel, and behave, it's safe to say that trauma can also affect teams and organizations, the way they think, feel, and behave. And day to day, our organizations can be trauma wired, trauma organized. And chronic fear disables organizations. Chronic fear will turn off the thinking part of an individual who gets triggered. We think about a veteran from overseas who saw combat, and they hear a motorcycle backfire, and they immediately go to that state, that hypervigilant state, that someone is shooting at them. They know cognitively that they're no longer in combat and they're just on the streets of Kansas City, but emotionally they're now been triggered. Well, chronic fear disables organizations as well. It can turn off the ability for an organization to think. So here's an example of the parallel process. I love this chart. When staff feel unsafe, clients are unsafe, and the organization is unsafe. Imagine this continuum can go from the center to the left to the right, or from the right to the left, or the left to the right. It goes all directions. If an organization is missionless, then staff will feel hopeless and clients will feel hopeless. If clients feel fragmented or overwhelmed, staff are fragmented and overwhelmed, and the agency is fragmented. If clients and staff feel helpless, then agency is stuck. If an agency is crisis driven, then the staff and the clients will be hyper aroused. All social service agencies that experience secondary trauma will find themselves in this parallel process. Right now, we're not in a state of crisis. We're in a training, so we can use the front part of our brain, the thinking part, the strong parts of our brain, and we can see this play out. Take a moment and think about an instance where clients came to you and they were feeling hopeless. And did you feel hopeless? And was the agency maybe stuck at that point? So, as we end this first training, the pain of change, and we believe in change, that's what we're all about as social service agents and as clinicians and counselors. The pain of change must be less than the pain of staying the same. But in order to truly do that, Sandra Bloom, psychiatrist, says all human service organizations are in the business of change. So you think we'd have an understanding of change. But when we are mired in our own secondary traumas and our organizations are stuck and missionless, it becomes really difficult to realize that we are actually making clients worse, not better. So, a formula for change. This comes from the psychiatrist Martha Welch. She said anger plus hopelessness equals a negative behavior, or anger plus helplessness, or worthless, or powerless. And we know the opposite of powerless is to be powerful, but power used in a negative way is not good. Well, when I was learning this formula of change with Welch, I realized that not everybody was angry. Some people were anxious. Anxious people that feel helpless or hopeless or worthless or powerless, they will also make negative choices. So, what do we do as an agency? Do we focus on this negative choice? And the answer is no. We have to focus on the ingredients, right? Not the behavior. We have to focus on the ingredients of hopeless, helpless, worthless, and powerless. And that's our alley, that's our road, our highway, our superhighway. Thanks so much for joining me in this first training, and I look forward to training number 2 and training number 3.